Greetings and good evening, good people. Welcome to this week's Joko, where we are continuing our discussion on culture, the arts, the significance of the arts in the struggle for our imagination. Joining me tonight is my partner and my comrade, Tasha. So please let me bring Tasha on stage.
And greetings and salutations of resilience and resistance, everyone.
Yes.
We always begin with an acknowledgement of our ancestors, of whom we are the literal expression, and who have shown us the way, if they are collective ancestors and personal ancestors, right? Shown us the way to survive and continue to be well under the onslaught of white supremacy and world domination. And so we always start with giving our acknowledgement and thanks for our ability to do that work and our growing consciousness and awareness. We always follow that up with an acknowledgement of power, our power acknowledgement, our sovereignty acknowledgement for the indigenous peoples on whose lands we are doing the work to liberate African people. And in our corner of Turtle Island, those folks are called the Tongvar, are called the Tongva, and the land is Tongavar. And we know that. We know that we do this work at the hospitality of them and their ancestors. And we are grateful that we do not walk confused, as some of our brothers and sisters are today, with these popular notions that we are somehow the original folk. All these lands are native lands. all these lands are native lands. And so it's our little opening invocation.
Yes. Thank you. As I always like to say, it's important political education, right? To always be reminded of the settler colonial character, of the United States and the various polities, at pretty much every level, local, regional, state, federal, right? The settler experience, and really still throughout the Americas, right? The settler colonialism is real and not something that happens over there, but right here. And we're talking about culture tonight, right? And so much of I don't want to call the success of settler colonialism, but maybe its ability to lay down its structures, right, and establish itself. So much of that has required, a monopoly on the narrative, right? films, for example, right? And not because it's
Mhm.
not only films, right? It's all the various forms of mass media and popular culture,
Mhm.
and that's what we're talking about, right? Culture. Um, so before I forget my thought, right, I'm thinking, early forms of popular culture, like the novel, as the novel emerges, especially in the 19th century, right? Where I guess in a way we can say, or it has been said, and we can say that the novel grows up, right? Really comes into its own as a form in the 19th century, more than the earlier forms, right? And think about when you think about pieces like James Fenimore Cooper and The Last of the Mohicans and that
Mhm.
kind of mythologizing, right, about what the United States is and its relation with the First Nations. And even the confession, right? The confession in the title, right? Why would it be the last of the Mohicans, right? The and work from folks like Nathaniel Hawthorne,
Mhm.
and that the figuring, right, the figuring
Mhm.
of America, um, the image and
Mhm.
popular at the time, and I think what would be called a romantic painting of
Mhm.
America, the female figure, the goddess
Mhm.
figure, right, westward
Mhm.
bound with the pioneers and what in front of her, and or she's leading them, and the
Mhm.
First Nations are in retreat, right? Those kinds of things, right? Firing up the imagination, and at a time when what we think of as mass media is really taking emerging, right? It's not
Mhm.
electronic yet, but
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
print capitalism, right, matters, right, and the productions of all these newspapers and pamphlets and things like that. That even so the role of culture in that. Um, I'm I'm going to keep going. Coming to mind is someone like Walt Whitman, who's so important, right, and as you know, is one of my favorite poets, and full of all the contradictions that a settler colonial project evokes, right? The a very forward thinking, he could be said about his work, and um, but at the same time, certainly, well, there's a kind of universalism in it, right? Universal familyhood of human beings, and um, the absolute equality of human beings, but also the Western and peculiarly American um, celebration of the individual, right, the individual self, but also that westward looking thing, right? That
Mhm.
the old poems like "Oh Pioneers," right, and um, maybe uncritically, right, or much more romantically. Although I don't want to overstate it, but anyway, I just again that's when we think about the role of art, right, in creating the national myth, the national or the imperial even ego ideal, right? Um, I've taken a long time. That was all preparatory because I've been wanting to say what I always forget to say. First of all, that I introduced Tasha, but I'm Youssef. You see my name on the screen. We are Joko. The I am a poet and a professor of composition and literature, and a scholar of cultural studies, with emphasis in Africana and media. studies. And my partner, Tasha, is also an educator. And I don't know if it's that much of a secret. If it is a secret, I'm about to tell it. Really, just really, really fine, fine poet. So, anyway, also, and we had invited two guests tonight, Quinoaa and Thomas. Quinoaa, also a poet and visual artist, and Thomas, a musician, to discuss the arts with us as we are working with them on a project right now that we're kind of getting into tonight. But they couldn't make it, right? Emergencies at the last moment. So we will, reschedule. Um, but that's what we're about tonight. I can't say I can call it a discussion because I've been talking. So I'm going to shut up now, and Tasha, let you pick up wherever you want.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to send some blessings and healing energy out to Thomas and Quinoaa, who are responding, to a family emergency that is health related. So we look forward, right, that ancestors guide and protect, and the
Mm-hmm.
needed healing and the needed remedies will be found and applied. Um, and you said so many interesting things in your discussion of the emergence of the novel and the beginning of the shaping of imaginations on a mass scale. And I guess this is post a biblical era where the main, perhaps in the Western elite world or what have you, the main reading or reference was Bible, and apart from some of these other ancient alchemical texts and these kinds
Mm-hmm.
of things. But this piece about, as we're talking about, like kind of like the subtext of our discussions is the imagination and what it means to the power, the importance and the power of imagination and what it means to capture it,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, this thing, what was interesting to me as you were talking is that so many things were emerging at the same time in terms of the mass print media and
Mm-hmm.
consumption of that media, growing literacy, um, um, the projection and the development of, the of I want to say, I want to say what comes to my mouth is the idea of white supremacy, but that's not really what I mean. I'm really wanting to refer to that social Darwinism, that era of, right, the era of the World Fair is what my mind comes
Yeah.
to. The era of the right and the creation of the primitive
Mm-hmm.
in the American and via the West and via America so much. As I recall, the brother, what he wrote, maybe you will remember his name. His book was Ebony and Ivy, and
Mm-hmm.
talking about um, how enslavement built up the universities in America.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that he talked about was how the American became the authority on the indigenous and the African,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and
Yes.
right, and as part of this whole social Darwin piece that also emerges here, social Darwinism piece that also emerges here, and everything that goes with it. So, and I say all this to say that how much that co-emergence perhaps even deepened that
Mhm.
mystification and deepened, this sense of inevitability of the supremacy of the European,
Mhm.
um, and as more and more people were invited into the whiteness, um, as compared to and opposed to the blackness, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
But in however a couple hundred years, right, emerges, or 100, I want my math won't be good on that, but 100 and some odd years, um, there is this subversion of that narrative. Those seeds of the subversion of that narrative, are planting themselves, and maybe even sooner than that. But in terms of it growing up, taking form, taking shape, and then you have, and I'm thinking of the Black Studies movement, you know, and how that spawns everybody else's studies movement, and it becomes right at a time, uh, along with Black arts movement and everybody else's arts movement, and the way that we lead liberation thinking and so
Mhm.
through our daring, um and at a time when there's a kind of, I imagine, like, there's a time at which maybe it's a kind of a critical mass thing, where there's a time where socially there is the capacity to reflect on an era, to reflect on a couple hundred years because of literacy and more, you know what I'm saying? And like reassess in a certain way. So um just just pointing to the drama of the moment, with the which you always a thing we always come back to, with the West trying desperately to recapture that time, that period, that that energy of
Mhm.
absorbing, this sense of the assuming the status of the supreme man, of the supreme human, and all of
Mhm.
the, you know what I'm saying, and all of
Well,
the.
well, yeah. I do.
Say that again.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's all.
and yeah, um, trying to recapture that energy, um, and that sense of itself as
Mhm.
great, and with when actually that has been it has already been subverted. There's no putting that cat back in the bag.
Right.
Not only has the study been done, but it's been popularized to, enough so that there are certain taken for granteds happening, um so I said all of that to say, um there is, there is the, after that co-emergence of all of those factors and the swell of, the imagined white supremacy cosmos, we are in a different era. We're in a different era, and that, um, even as the perhaps I consider it kind of the vanguard question now uh, in thinking, is challenging the knowledges, challenging the ways of knowing, and beginning to assert now, you know, also, that there's no magic, there's no such magical white man's, and I'll put that in quote, technology that is the proof and evidence of the superiority, um and so the practice of our voice, the practice of our imagination, and the practice of art is vital. Another way in which it is vital to uh, the progress of political liberation, of actual material liberation, of standing up, again in the world, right? Free, proud, and productive peoples of the planet. That's it. I'm gonna stop.
So you and really before this even, you mentioned, you know, notions of, who the Turtle Islanders are and all that, right? Um, and I don't know how popular or widespread that is, or how
Mhm.
deeply that goes, right? Or
Mhm.
even if it is kind of spread, is it spread thin? Um, but is that that seems to be really for a failure of imagination, or a dissatisfaction or a disruption, right, in um, say the project of the Black Arts Movement, um, its analogs around the world, and contemporary, and it's but certainly in this country, right? As
Mhm.
folks are making that claim in North America, um, and and Black studies or Africana studies also. Um, but I'm probably over harsh using the word failure, because it also seems like this is what the effort to make to disrupt that, right? Um,
Mhm.
to intervene in the imagination that was being everywhere exhibited as the 1980s
Mm.
was turning into the 1990s.
Mhm.
Um, and again, even those things that end up not necessarily being the best of things still, can support a particular mood or momentum. So I think back, at that time of, the ubiquity of folks wearing the X, right, or
Mhm.
wearing the X hat. Um,
Mhm.
and actually, this was before the Malcolm X movie came out, right? That was already happening. Sometimes I forget that that movie actually came out in the 90s and not the late 80s. Sometimes it feels
Mhm.
like that, or that it wasn't 90 or something. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, that kind. So this is also again about the time I think brought it up last week that Newsweek found it necessary to put the bas relief of Cleopatra on its cover and raise
Mm.
these questions about the Afrocentric narrative,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
because it was making it headway, right,
Yes. Mhm.
and needed to be addressed,
Mhm.
so that to find us here, where there are some vocal and visible contingents of folks um, wanting to reject anything African,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and I don't think necessarily in every case, but really ultimately, right, is a result of forces, media, and government, not wanting that to go forward,
Mhm.
wanting to um,
Mhm.
curtail that, redirect
Mhm.
that, de radicalize that as much as possible, Americanize, the
Mhm.
the misuse of the
Mhm.
multicultural principle, right? In some cases, and so that's why we end up with that limited imagination about who we are. that some, folks might say, no, we had the imagination to realize, and no, actually, you you are a victim of a psyop, I would think. Actually, as we all are, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, because the other part of that is not, um, you don't have to claim to be the first, you know, uh, the first real nations or whatever, right? It's enough to uh,
Mhm.
claim American citizenship in that way, right?
Mhm.
To not imagine beyond American citizenship,
Mhm. Mhm.
or that freedom can only
Mhm.
happen on terms, that
Mhm.
have been set by the United States. Anyway,
And
that occurred to me right when you mentioned that.
yeah, um, and we see
Oh,
the import.
I'm sorry. Just real quick before we
Mhm.
get away from it.
Mhm.
Um, Ebony and Ivy. The writer is Craig Stephen Wilder.
Craig Stephen Wilder. Yes. Um, I was going to say, and it is coming back.
Good, because I'm sorry.
No, it's not. It has nothing to do with the regular, flow of conversation.
Yeah.
What it has to do, and I'll tell anybody who'll listen for 5 minutes, is this lacosamide they have me taking for these seizures that I rarely have. Anyway, but that's another story.
Mm.
um, but what did I want to say? You oh come on. I wanted to come back.
As I was talking
Come
about
back
that
around.
limited amount, that
The
disruption.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, talking about this is the disruption, the redirection, right, of of the set of images and associations and all of that,
Yep.
um, which is being deployed now,
Yeah.
with these folk who are attempting to uh, segue this country into a more explicit and definite fascism and authoritarianism, and and grab the imaginations by using all of these um you know these uninformed black artists in there,
Hmm. Hmm.
bringing them to the stage,
Right.
if you will, posturing friendship with those who they are understanding as um, having the most influential images, right?
Right. As they
Faces,
understand it.
known faces.
Hmm.
Yes, Um, so what I was thinking about was, yeah, that importance of capturing the imagination, and how important um suppression is, story suppression and
Hmm.
image suppression is, to that,
Hmm.
how important the invisibilizing of the group you are attempting to manipulate, suppress, oppress,
Yeah.
do all these things with, how important their invisibility is to um to that narrative, right? To that narrative. I'm looking at the pictures behind us,
Hmm.
um and which of course, we talk about all the time, and always refer to, and you just mentioned Time magazine cover with, well, I guess the question was, was Cleopatra black? I don't remember the cover. Um, but yeah, the images, a huge part of what our African centered scholars brought to us, and brought directly to the community in those days, was, these images of us on
Hmm.
the wall, the images that you don't see, and they told the story of, what the things that are not on display and
But
centralized
it's
when
in
you go to the
display.
British
Right.
Museum, that,
Exactly.
and, that, you know, tell a different story. And the other piece, the story of the Egyptian is part of wherever the Egyptian is from, wherever the Kamahu is from, it's a black somewhere because I know I'm looking at myself, right? But then the other piece is like the sister behind me, the way that the representation of images normalizes that person
Yeah.
in our consciousness.
Right.
It takes out fear and loathing. It it neutralizes fear and loathing. You think about the effect and the impact, and this is uh moving away from an us conversation to an extent, but of those, and there is a name for them that you will call when I start describing it, um, those Dust Bowl images, in terms of looking at American poverty, and like that iconic image of the woman sitting on her
Mhm.
porch with her two
The
children, and
the
the story.
Dorothea Lange photograph.
Thank
Yeah.
you, thank
Famous.
you.
Yeah. I think,
Yes,
yeah, Dorothea Lange. Yeah.
the impact of that series in moving,
Hmm.
I guess, elite sympathies, more or less. Of course, there's, that era of, the society of compassionate white women.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that, I say that tongue in
Hmm.
cheek, but that's largely what it was. These charitable societies for the orphan, for the poor, for the this, for the that,
Hmm.
and um,
And
the
marshaling support, real grassroots on the ground political support for the New Deal, right?
right
'Cause I
for
think even that series
policies.
of photographs was taken through federal funding, right?
Hmm. Right. Yes. Yes. And so, if there's no questions asked if there's something that's not seen, you
Right.
know. So this speaks to, this invisibilizing of characters in a narrative. We can look at the impact of slave narratives
Hmm.
in that same, right. I,
And written specifically to be propaganda. And that is to
mhm,
say,
mhm,
to propagate the truth of the condition, right? To
mhm,
get it out, to bring it
mhm,
forward to people. But, specifically, right? Lauda Equiano's, the
mhm.
interesting life, right, and
Yeah.
specifically, right, written for the abolitionist audience in the
Mhm,
British
mhm,
Empire, right, and
mhm,
the same with brother man, Frederick Douglass's,
mhm,
telling his story, right, and
mhm, mhm,
accounts of him, you know,
mhm,
dramatically, removing his shirt to show the scars on his back, right? But
mhm,
to show though
mhm.
that he was living evidence, right, of
Right,
the abuses that people, were living with.
right.
Yeah, and very intentionally using that literary
Mhm,
and in a sense the
mhm,
invention of a literary
mhm,
tradition
mhm,
um, to to move people to make a change, right, in
mhm,
that condition,
mhm.
to outlaw slavery, which sometimes I don't think people realize, right? We're not just talking about however many hundreds of years in the Americas, or however
Yeah,
many decades in what becomes the United States if you cut out the colonial period.
yeah,
But like about 5,000 years of human
yeah,
history in a particular theater of history, so to speak, right? But
yeah,
but a taken for granted for so many people for so long,
yes.
that some people. could be owned by others, right? So just how
Yes.
radical an idea that was.
Right.
Um, I just totally underappreciated. Right? Just how radical. I mean, as we know now, people are talking. They're
Right.
contemporary
Right. Abolitionists.
21st century slavery.
Yes.
People being
Oh,
bought and sold
excuse me.
in
Yeah.
open markets
That's right. That's right.
because it is such a human activity and thought to be acceptable for such a long time, and
Yeah.
particularly again in a particular swath of the earth in
Yeah.
particular, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so
Um, but yes, the impact in
mm,
those narratives weren't, they weren't like catalogs, they weren't chronicles, they were engaging, well turned, it's good writing, it's good
it's good
storytelling.
writing,
It's
exactly.
These are interesting stuff, it's not just a diary of
It's not
daily.
just a diary, right?
It's it's the writer's craft,
Yeah,
and it's an exposure of the writer's craft as well,
that's right.
um storytelling,
Hmm.
right, that enduring entertainment, that enduring
Hmm.
art, that the fundamental art, because what art is not storytelling? What art
Right.
is not storytelling? Image tells a story. I would
Interesting.
argue even the quote unquote abstract, is
Tells a story.
engaging us in storytelling, you
Hmm.
know, even as it engages our own reflections and images. Like if something's not representational, you begin to weave your own story. You begin
Hmm.
to
Exactly,
enter
precisely.
conversation with it, begin to, um, um, join it,
Hmm.
in a conversation and in a narrative and in its own story. Um, but all of that is part and parcel of this question that we are bandying about tonight. How did you phrase it? What is the purpose? Not that you didn't say purpose. Um, in writing to Quinoa and Thomas. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up real
Looking up
quick.
yourself. Yeah.
Um,
I'm about to see it.
why it matters, what kind of art we're producing,
Why does it matter what we're producing?
what kind of
Why
art
does
we're
it matter?
producing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What kind of art you're producing,
yeah.
Um, and your one is one's consciousness and understanding grows, um as one's voice and skill grows,
Mhm,
and hopefully,
mhm,
um, because there is such a thing as very skilled folk, um, turning out, why do we say certain things are trash? What does that mean? It's like, this is garbage. This is, or what have you.
mhm,
Beside it being poorly constructed, you know, um, I think that there is a consciousness of the message. Where is this
mhm,
taking me as a human being in
mhm,
terms of the ancient and everywhere represented conversation in human culture, um, the approach of some kind of moral ideal. There is such a thing as a good. There is such a thing as and I'm trapped in this language continuum, but there is such a thing as an ideal state, a state of pleasantness, peace, of whatever that is, and there are certain things that we do to get there, um, collectively, and so I think I'll posit that, and I'm interested in your response, your reflection on that. Um, is good art something that has a that is it somehow didactic, or is it somehow lifting us toward um, our higher ideals, whether those are specific ideals specific to our culture or what have you? What would you say to
Well,
that?
yeah, I think that it's impossible to say that, with definitively, right, what that is or what that's like, just because of, who is completing the piece, right? How is the audience reading it, or, hearing it, or, who's making, again, who's making the judgment, the evaluation, and on what criteria. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is it moving one forward? Um, does it give us something to think about, or to feel in a particular way, beyond the kind of, I guess, immediate, what makes something erotica
Mm-hmm.
versus pornography?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
is that a subjective thing, right? Just because
Mm-hmm.
it's, artistically done, is it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or it had a big budget or what
Mm-hmm.
have you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also think, right, and and even in some cases where the intention is even sort of an amorality, or an inversion of morality, but it's making a comment because it's making a commentary on morality, right? And maybe even making a commentary about the hypocrisy of, given mores, and that this moment in Western, and maybe just English language, I can't say with certainty. Um, but sir, I think it's identified among the English Romantics. So what's his name? Um, Lord Byron,
Mm-hmm.
Shelley, this crew, um, of heroizing Satan or the devil, right? But as an anti-hero, though, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
emergence of the anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
But not just, to be contrary, as it were, but as a commentary, right, on the hypocrisy of those who deem themselves moral, right, moral,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
judges, etc. And in so and I'm speaking in generalities, right, but just this sort of idea, um, and so a purposeful kind of inversion of morality as a commentary on morality or not, right, and in each case somehow saying something about its own time and place and civilizational moment, right, in construct,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. But yeah, I mean, I am of the opinion, and it again an oversimplification, but the Du Boisian idea, um, laid out in criteria of Negro art, 1920s, 25, maybe 26, something like that. Um, all art is propaganda, right?
Mm-hmm.
All art is propaganda. So the notion of art for art's sake, but that
Mm-hmm.
is a set of that is a value, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is the propagation of an idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of what is the
Mm-hmm.
role of art in society,
Mm-hmm.
only to be beautiful, and that beauty is based on
Right.
these formal aspects, perhaps
Right.
attitude, execution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Execution above everything else, perhaps. That but so the notion that it's just art, or it's just a movie, it's just a book, they're just dancing,
Right.
there's always more going on, right? However, and whomever or whoever happens to be viewing and judging and evaluating, right? um, Between the the recognition that those kids twerking
Mhm.
don't know it,
Mhm.
but they are reproducing, some
Mhm.
traditional dance moves, right?
Mhm.
From
Mhm.
not only their continental ancestors, but their continental contemporary cousins,
Contemporaries.
right?
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
and then the other person watching it and saying, "What a shame," right? How
Yeah.
indecent
Right.
these children are, right?
Right.
They might be from the same household, right? The two people,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So that so much has to do, and then who gets the bully pulpit, so to speak, right? Or
Right.
which idea can then go forward and um you
Cover
know
area and be
you
repeated.
know
Yeah.
but I always like recalling though what my one of my students mentioned, that, and actually he was saying that this was something somebody told him, that is oft repeated, that the victors or the winners write the history. But he said, but my friend said, yes, but the losers tell their story, and that goes around too, right? The losers tell their story, and that's ground up also,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's ground up.
Right.
So that tension is always there.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and there's a level, again, we're closing in on February. Pan
Mhm.
African Film Festival is coming up. If you
Mhm.
happen to be in the
Mhm.
Los Angeles area, you should not miss it.
Do not
And if you
miss
are
it.
not in the Los Angeles area, paff.org, because you can stream movies and you can stream those year round. Um,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it's like Brother Babu says, um, or no, Ayugo Babu, right?
Mhm.
There are going to be popcorn movies, and
Mhm.
there's going to be some
Mhm.
down and dirty documentaries, and
Mhm.
some revolutionary features, and
Mhm.
revolutionary narratives, and a little bit of everything, right?
Mhm.
And I think we can do it all. Right?
Mhm.
So again, another quick example. um, so you got uh, going to the mid 70s here, right? So you got Rastaman Vibration, comes out, Bob Marley and the Wailers, a lot of political music on it, right? You also got roots rock reggae on it, but a lot of political music on it. Followed by Exodus, the same, right? A lot of
Mhm.
political, although you also get Turn the Lights Down Low, but
Mhm.
again, a lot of political on it. But then Kaya comes out, right? And it's mostly love songs and stuff. And there was commentary at the time. Oh, Bob has gone soft, right?
Hmm.
Artists are more, we can encompass it all is the thing, right?
Yes.
We can encompass it all, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's just that simple a thing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So again, if I can make another literary reference, because I teach literature, I mean, I do not engage in the controversy over who was Shakespeare and was it one, blah, blah, blah. The point is, there are the romances and the comedies and the histories and the tragedies. There's a range in the artist, right? So, and we can encompass it all because that is encompassing the human experience.
Precisely. Precisely.
But the
Encompassing.
conditions don't change. Well, but we're trying to change the conditions, right? So, and we do have impact.
Mhm. Um, and yeah, and some of that is again this consciousness piece, and what we identify as worthy, and what we identify um, as potent,
Mhm.
particularly in this culture where we have so much practice of so much consumption practice, which is also this uh, life way of going outside of the self, of the environs, of the immediate
Mhm.
space to fill, right? So one goes out and consumes such and such and such, right? And what's being offered for consumption is curated, yeah. But
Mhm.
we relate to the act of consuming, going out of this home, of the neighborhood, of the hamlet, quote unquote, of right, as being part of getting to something real
Mhm.
in a way that perhaps in the not too long ago we didn't, in a way.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
thinking part of what I'm thinking about a few things. One of the things I'm thinking about is the Chitlin circuit,
Mhm.
the way that it was the movie about Bessie Smith that Viola Davis recently did. Was it, no,
Mhm.
no, Ma Rainey. It was
Oh, yeah, okay,
yeah.
the film version, okay.
Yes. And someone else did a Bessie Smith. And actually I think that was Queen Latifah. But and one of her lines in the film, in the Viola Davis film,
This is
was
the Ma Rainey film, or
yeah, Ma
the
Rainey.
Ma
Yeah. And
Rainey, okay.
I saw it a couple of times. I think it was called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Yeah, 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 the August Wilson, the film version of the August Wilson play
Yes.
with,
Yes.
what's the brother's name? I've gone blank just now.
Chad
Chadwick, yeah.
Chadwick yeah, Chadwick
Yeah,
Boseman.
last
And there was a line
project.
in in the uh in the film where they're dealing with folks that want to exploit the music and want to
Mhm. Mhm.
and she says several times, I don't need to be here. You didn't make me. You can't unmake me. You
Mhm.
want a little piece of, you know what I'm saying? You want a little piece of
Mhm.
my action, you know, and there was just a whole, just a whole
Mhm.
part of how her presumption of control and assumption of control in that
Mhm.
relationship. But it just in terms of what I'm really talking about is the Chitlin circuit, a
Mhm.
time
Mhm.
and, again, not too long ago, you know, race records,
Mhm.
Chitlin circuit, Motown crossover,
Mhm.
to I mean we can talk about hip hop, we can talk about any of those things that are still
Yes.
internally generated, and it was satisfying. We were fine with getting buying mixtapes out of the back of out of trunk,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and
Right,
for
exactly.
a long time we were quite satisfied, to go
Mhm.
and see who the new artist was and who was worth listening to on our terms,
Mhm. Mm.
I am
Right,
not
on our terms,
on our
exactly,
terms.
and artists who knew their audience,
Yes.
and so created for that audience.
Created for that audience within a conversation that was particular to the community's values, to the community's experiences, all of that. So it also speaks to a memory continuum and a
Mhm.
literally a cultural continuum.
Mhm.
I don't know how to think about where we are today, and I'm not trying to make any kind of sweeping or conclusive statements because literally I don't know enough about popular music. I don't know enough about what we're doing in our communities. The last thing I knew about and was aware of was when we were crumping, and when that was it got some focus, and some of it was our own focus and our own
Mhm.
analysis of the phenomenon,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
again, that is a part and parcel of that that academic assertion when we began to ask questions about, our own, phenomenon. I am I am researching,
Mhm.
my topic of research is the so and such of, of hip hop and
Yeah.
you get me. So, just saying, that the uh practice and the life way of being about consumption threatens to alienate us from ourselves and alienate us from our continuum, because we need to go and buy what they're selling in order to feel legitimate, in order to feel
Mhm.
valid, in order to feel
Mhm.
like we're moving on socially. And the place that then takes me is a place that we like to go, and a place that we went in the Art in the World We Want um Role of Art in the World We Want series, is the way that uh uh art and culture in our continuum, in our cultural continuum, and an African cultural continuum, and in so many traditional cultural systems, is continuums, is not separate from the daily life, right? The everyone's an artist reality,
Mhm.
the reality of the artisanal, beautifully crafted, whatever it is, you
Mhm.
know, um, um, being ubiquitous, being everywhere present, being everywhere, and not as a product, in that way. For it to be a product, again, there has to be that relationship in the thinking, um, established as well. So I think we need to see how we can reawaken that, how we can, or give that, how do we amplify,
I think amplify is the word, right? Yeah, because
Uh-huh.
it is in all right. That's not a tradition that's gone away, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and really around the world, right? Around the global Africa, right? Those traditions, right? Of everybody is an artist um, in so many ways, and often it is ourselves who that constitute our canvas. Um, our hair, constitutes our clay, as it were, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and there's so many, dare I say, natural poets, or
Absolutely.
or just the great,
Mhm.
um, you know, uh,
Mhm.
respect around, and maybe globally in lots of
Mm.
communities, but there's certainly anybody, folks who can turn a phrase, right? Gotta rap around the black world, right?
Yeah.
You're respected for that, right? And
Right.
that is a well respected thing, right?
Right.
You can use the spoken word well, and
Right.
also can reference the culture in that use of the spoken word, right? And knows
Yeah.
when and where to drop the right proverb, and
Right.
all of that. Is very
Right.
important. So yeah, one of those other areas, right, of the various ways. I remember my great grandmother, the whole house right over there, and what, I don't know what the neighborhood's called now. Is it still part of West Adams? I don't know. Um, but over on Alsace, right? Alsace, and between Sycamore and Adams. The she would paint like the squares of the cement backyard, but that where you have the little block thing. She would
Yes.
paint those multiple colors and
Yes.
paint the
Yes.
trees, so
I was about to say, my aunt
in the back.
paints
Yeah,
the trees, baby.
paint the
Yeah.
trees.
She
Yeah,
does that. Yeah.
and this is just, and this was common, right? I mean, she wasn't
Right.
the only one doing those things,
Right.
and you look at, you see images from around the world. Certainly you see some of the way those incredible, the incredible African architecture, the so-called African hut, right?
Yeah.
That please. Um, the way they're decorated, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, the everybody is an artist thing, and I think that's really important, because that has been part
Mhm.
of this, what do you call it, sort of this division of labor, right, in
Yeah.
the modern world,
Mhm.
where the artist
Mhm.
is now a special category of worker.
Mhm.
Um, Only even that's obscured, right? Because
Mhm.
there's the
Mhm.
artist in the imagination,
Mhm.
these unconventional people who maybe live on the fringes of society, right? Whatever, or had become successful and but
Mhm.
are always odd, right? But never
Mhm.
think about the army of artists, right, that work for advertising agencies or film studios, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, etc. Right? The art that goes into almost all every commodity in which you
Yes.
interact. The
Yes.
candy bar you picked up, right? The bottle of kombucha you got, right, that an artist worked on in terms of
Absolutely.
design for that label. So
Yeah.
this another exploitable category
Yes.
for a capitalist system, in which everything can be for sale, right?
Mhm.
And then you can categorize the art in various
Mhm.
kinds of ways, and the artist, and
Mhm. Mhm.
what can be,
Mhm.
what obscenities.
Mhm.
Um,
And then create a hierarchy within
hmm
it that reflects the hierarchies
hmm
in yeah,
But
exist.
there's always this countervail, right?
Mhm. Right.
Of art from the ground up.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And the recognition of that is by the the producers of the
Mhm.
day-to-day art. Got me thinking
Mhm.
about a sister that, performed at a slanguage that I attended, and, she participated in the open mic portion, and she was just absolutely marvelous, right? And she was telling her story. It's like, "Yeah, over at Sims Library, right? Yeah, we're always trying to get her to publish and do this and do that." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm coming, but I had 5 kids. I had this. I had to do this. I had to do that, and I didn't have time to do all of that." And she told her story of you know jotting down her poems on a napkin, or jotting down, or telling
Mhm.
her one of her children to write something down on the way to school. She's dropping them off, and a
Mhm.
poem comes, and she's like, "Write this down, write this down,"
That's
and,
great.
because this is simply it's very quite simply who she is and how her energy works and manifests. I think
Yeah.
the oratory art in
Yeah.
our famous oratory arts
Yeah.
in
That's right.
our churches, part and parcel of how we have digested and um, assimilated the Christian motif into our motif, how we've made it, uh, an African thing
Yeah.
without having any specificity with that, whether it's
Mhm.
an Igbo thing or Yoruba thing or you know what I'm saying, a Wolof
Mhm.
thing or something like that, all that combination to make it something recognizable and moving and aesthetically pleasing,
Mhm.
essentially, you know?
Mhm.
And the way the aesthetic is our portal, as human beings, symbols, aesthetic,
Mhm.
make me feel, make me see, dazzle my, stimulate me,
Touch me,
touch
move
me,
me.
move,
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
all of that,
Yes. I'm okay
and
with a little. Sometimes you get a little, silent chuckle. That's okay. But sometimes you need to guffaw, as they say, right?
right.
You need a body laugh, right? A belly laugh.
Yes,
You
yes,
need them both, right?
and
So,
yes, again, and that's the inclusivity, that they're reaching for, that so many cultures carry,
mhm,
so much a
mhm,
part of the contemporary conversation, this uh attempting to heal from binary thinking, the attempt to,
mhm,
you know what I'm saying, to
mhm,
heal from exclusivity, via inclusivity from all, you know what I'm saying? And our cultures, again, are
Mhm.
instructive, are
Mhm.
viable. And so I'm thinking about, where did my mind go? To our dance life ways, that the inclusive ritual of the dance, right?
Mhm.
Such a
Mhm.
wonderful statement. Gather round, make the rhythm, make the, however, if all you have is some hands, you know what I'm saying, and stomping feet, and everybody in the community enters the center at some point portion, even if it's not everybody, that, I'm not going to try to be that rigid, but let's say anybody might enter that
But
center,
yeah, everybody has the opportunity,
has the opportunity,
one way or
regardless of
another. Yeah.
age, ability, quote unquote, a skill, but you know what I'm saying? And yes, we
Mhm.
love to see a very skilled mover, and someone who has that in their body chemistry and whatever their brain can
Mhm.
show that as well. But in terms of a holistic expression of inclusivity and mutuality and
Mhm.
togetherness, um, everybody has a place in the circle, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and and this is day-to-day aesthetic, day-to-day beauty, right? Self-made, self-made, like a home-cooked meal. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to go out to dinner. You can cook at home, kind of a thing. But you can also make your flatware. You can also, there's all kinds of things you can do. Um, and yeah, it's good to recognize that and celebrate that. Um, and to the other, on the other end, um, the need for the word of the day recently has been deploying the aesthetic, deploying to to rouse folk to meet the political need of the moment,
Mhm.
the justice needs, the um, you know, everything that.
Let's talk about the political need of the moment.
Yes, please.
But before we do, just very quickly, since I brought her up, I should show her the respect to name her, to call her name. That's my great grandmother, grandmother Olga. Olga
Mm,
Justine de la Rose McRoyal.
mm.
She was wonderful to me, anyway. I've heard stories, but I can certainly say to me, um, my cousins, right, of my age peers, even though they're all actually um, a generation ahead of me, though we're age peers. Um, yeah, she was wonderful to us, and certainly to me. So anyway, grandmother, love you.
Mm,
Still be thinking about her.
mhm,
Copying her, it's copying her. She was the one who would have little shrines around the house, right? Well, around I remember at the two ends of the hallway, right? So here and there'd be one there, a bunch of like anyway. Um, Olga. That's not true because that actually is true of several kitchens. But no, in truth, she's who I have in mind in the poem "Grandmother's Kitchen." It's really her kitchen that I have in
mm,
mind, which then became my grandmother's kitchen. So great grandmother,
mhm,
but anyway.
mhm, mhm,
Um, anyway, though, yes, this moment, right? This political moment. Um, where there's so much going on, right? So I know, for example, in some communication we had with the comrade earlier, this is the 100-year anniversary of several birthdays for several revolutionaries, right?
mhm, mhm,
Um,
mhm,
actually, as I'm thinking about it, it's it that Du Bois' essay might be from 26, but the Langston Hughes essay, The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, is 100 years old this year.
Hmm.
And I think quite timely,
Wow.
excuse me,
Mhm.
given some of the events, right? And um, it's the 50-year anniversary, or will be the 50-year anniversary. No, I'm sorry, the 70-year anniversary of the Bandung Conference.
Mhm.
So, there's, and which also gets me thinking about, as particularly as we're talking about the role of artists, right? Um, the the conferences of Negro writers and artists that were happening in the 50s,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
completely engaged, right, in
Mhm.
the national liberation struggles, in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
proletarian revolution, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and attended by people like Frantz Fanon,
Hmm.
Richard Wright,
Hmm.
Eskia
Hmm.
Mfalele, etc. Right, various folks. So there are a lot, that this year is significant in many ways, right? It's several, and there's another one, something else you mentioned that made me think, oh, then you mentioned some other. Actually, I was thinking about it. I mentioned Bob earlier. It's the
Mhm.
50th anniversary of
Hmm.
the Bob Marley and the Wailers live album, which
Wow.
in many ways I think was the one that sort of launched the international career in a real kind of way, right?
Okay.
Um, but anyway, it's a pivotal album, right? And yeah, and it's
Mhm.
the 50th year anniversary of that album's release, 75,
Mhm.
right? So anyway, so the political moment we're in now, where the far right and the organized right, um, is in power and empowered, and there is currently no real opposition in the structural political arena, I guess you might say, right? Is the Democratic Party is in, at least at some kind of federal or national level, in some kind of disarray, it would seem, right? Or trying to buy back its soul, maybe. I don't know.
Hmm.
We'll see. Um,
Hmm.
well,
Mhm.
anyway, I'm not. I don't have high hopes. The
Mhm.
So now what, right? So what are the artists? You and I talked earlier already about a deployment of the artistic, and likely in a way that's likely, um, I always have some difficulty attributing intention to people, because if I'm not in the room, right? But it's hard for me not to think about it's hard for me not to think that they didn't think about the sympathy that would be raised by the new movie coming out September 5th, right?
Mhm.
Which retells the story
Mhm.
of the Munich Olympics and the killing of Israeli team members, I guess, or that were held hostage. Um, Although it's being told from the point of view of the ABC television crew or whatever, right?
Mm.
Whatever. But anyway, I'm already seeing that. Okay, here's some art. It's going to be
Mm.
distributed on a mass level at a
Mhm.
time, several years now, right? Of the attitude toward Israel, the state of Israel, um, undergoing a change like we've never seen, right? Israel does not enjoy the uncritical support of American citizens
Mhm.
anyway, if it
Mhm.
still enjoys the US government, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It doesn't enjoy an
Mm.
automatic
Mm.
approval from U.S. Jewish U.S. citizens, right?
Mhm.
And particularly younger folks.
Mhm.
Um, and so that that film looks to be an intervention in
Mm.
that, right? Can we use film to shift these attitudes again?
Mhm.
Um, and then,
Mhm.
like you say, we've got these black hip hop artists, Snoop, Nelly, whomever, and Lil Wayne. I think was the guy. Lil Wayne was the guy you were thinking about the other
Yes.
day.
That's what I was
Um,
thinking of.
so a couple of things occurred to me. One, they aren't the most contemporary artists, right? So there's already a kind of a shift there. But yeah, the intention is clear. What they're trying to do, and they're already. And I think this is part of the deal one makes, right, with the mainstream, and
You're
what?
frozen. You
Yeah, you were
froze.
frozen. We were both
Okay.
blanking, spinning
We were
for a minute. I
mutually
don't know what
frozen?
happened.
Okay.
Right. But anyway, um, they're already part of the system, right? And to some extent, I think they're just trying to protect theirs, right? Keep the access.
Hmm.
Dr. Gerald Horn, I think correctly calls these sorts of individuals class collaborators, and they most certainly are, right?
Mhm.
They're trying to protect their class interest at a certain level, whether or not they feel what they're doing is right or not.
Mhm.
Again, let me not make assumptions about intent, but
Mhm.
we see what the effect can be, though, right?
Mhm.
Whatever you may have intended,
Mm.
you have
Mhm.
co-signed
Mhm.
with folks who are dedicated to your destruction and
Mhm.
certainly the dismantling of your community
Mm.
and what
Mm.
tiddling little services there are
Mm.
relative to a military budget
Mm. Mm. Mm.
and profit margins
Mm.
that so many of members of your community, your heritage, your neighborhoods where you grew up
Yeah.
rely on
Rely on.
just to reproduce life, right? Just to live to the next day.
Never
Um,
mind attack on your communities and your the part you're not getting and your um but the part of the political manifestation, the manifestation in civil life of the civil rights work. This attack
mhm,
on this attack on DEI
mhm,
is about an attack on the tiny bit of support that for enforcement of the gains of the
mhm.
of the Voting Rights Act, of the of the civil rights legislation that outlaw specifically of the civil rights legislation that outlaws discrimination and segregation and all of those kinds of things. This DEI stuff is about upholding that, protecting that, in creating some kind of enforcement
Yeah,
mechanism still needed in this day and time that you imagine and or have been sold the notion that we're in some kind of post-race, I don't know.
yeah.
You said you're not assuming intent, and I just got to say I don't know what you're thinking. What are you
Mhm,
thinking? However
mhm.
much, however much, however many millions you have, because you're not a class, you're not in a class with billionaires,
You
first of
aren't
all,
a billionaire, exactly.
or
Even
you
if you're
know,
100 millionaire.
oh, exactly, You
Just
know,
you're not.
you're not having that conversation. What conversation do you imagine? What common ground are you imagining you have? I mean, I don't know. I don't know, but it is certainly a pity, and I hope that they don't have too great of an influence and too
Mhm,
great of an effect. Hopefully, the Kendrick Lamars are at least as influential in terms of how the
mhm.
community, you know what I'm
And
saying? What the
influential in a
community is
way,
feeling about.
can get a platform to say, I would never do that, right? I
Right,
refused to do that.
right.
And I mean, it would be great if folks would refuse to do the Super Bowl.
It would be great.
I'm a football fan. I'm not going to try to
Right.
pretend I'm not,
Yeah.
but you ain't got anyway.
Right. Right.
I,
Something. Yeah.
you can not you can still not condone things, right? I mean,
And
um,
and this question, what will it cost you? Nothing. Cost you nothing. There's nothing compelling you. You're not compelled by a need of any kind
no, not
to
really.
get up there and let your image, your face, your energy be used in that way. You're not compelled by any kind of need.
For really
Anyway.
just some of the worst elements in a society that's already what was Amos Wilson's phrase, crimogenic. It's already a crimogenic society, and some of the worst, no, yeah, some of the worst, maybe all of the worst, are this is who you're co-signing with.
Goodness.
And
Good.
I mean, they're still grifting, right? That's just it
Yeah.
is astounding. But we also know there again, that's the mass media, mass popular culture, that they're taking advantage of. We know that the Democratic Party during the campaign attempted to do the same thing. Certainly, a lot of the many celebrities that were part of the Harris campaign events, and I think understandably, I mean, it's what they do. The but the arts from the ground up, right? I know we were going to talk about or we were going to have Quinoaa and Thomas on to talk about a project that they came to us with, real talk, given what has come to power in this country. There were already the conditions for it,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
because it's the
Mhm.
United States. There are always the conditions for it.
Mhm.
However, we're looking at an intensification
Mhm.
and a real serious intensification.
Mhm.
The And they're doing it, right. There already been some issues. Heard some news from Chicago, right, that there may have been some moves there, although there was also a report that for all of the extra activity, there's been no real uptick yet, but that's
Mhm.
a yet,
Mhm.
right. So given all that, right, they said, hey, we want to do this thing, right, give people a place to tell their stories, a place to challenge these false narratives, to resist, right, and to move forward, despite what's coming to us. And I think that there's a lot of that probably happening in lots of places. um,
Mhm. Mhm.
we're going to do this thing with Quinoaa and Thomas, and we've invited people already, and it's still in the planning stages, so we will make more specific announcements soon. But it's going to happen, right? We know it's going to happen, and and it's very intentional, right? Talking about it, we are being intentional about people being able to use their art as a form of resistance, education, rebellion, to move people, right, to action. The to resist, right, to resist what could be coming, to protect each other. The And I know that's got to be happening in other places,
Yes.
that
Yes.
other folks are
Absolutely.
seeing the moment,
Yes.
thinking about what how do we use our art to resist this moment, this
Mhm. Mhm.
fascistic moment.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's always tricky, right?
Mhm.
We've always been treated like they're fascist, right? Right? The
Mhm.
colonized. I mean, so much of
Mhm.
what but it
Mhm.
isn't. It is something different at the same time too,
Mhm.
because it does squeeze the political space that we've clawed and fought for. That
Mhm.
ain't even liberation, but
No.
it's the democratic space
Yes.
to continue to struggle and demand to be treated with human dignity,
Human
and
dignity.
for us and for everyone, right?
Yes.
Because when it gets better for Black people,
Yes.
it gets better for everyone.
Yes.
And ain't nobody asking for anything special. That's why I actually hate the phrases like gay rights, women's rights, trans rights.
Human
It's
rights.
really the human rights that everybody should have access to. And if you got to tailor them in a special way because this is a particular group of people, then do it, because all they want are the rights we all enjoy,
Joy.
or we all should enjoy anyway.
Yes. Exactly. That
So
should be enjoyed.
you mean human rights. You mean the
Yes.
rights of citizens
Right.
and
Human being,
residents,
and beyond that, human
period.
beings. Right.
Human beings, right?
That's all.
That's all.
It's not
That's all
difficult.
anybody's really talking about. And the right
Yep.
to live free, right? To live sovereign
Yes.
for individual, or self-identified collectives,
Yes.
however global they may be.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, yeah, it is challenge, um, a challenge to the given order, a challenge to whatever is meant by Western civilization.
Mhm.
There are other ways of knowing and doing and being.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just that.
Mhm.
Just as you
Mhm.
said earlier, right? The
Mhm.
other knowledges, the
Mhm.
other ways of knowing,
Mhm.
the other
Mhm.
systems of knowing.
Mhm.
Um,
The chauvinism doesn't work in an age where people are living in conglomerate metropolis, necessarily pluralistic, all those
mhm,
things. What role does uh what viable role can a
mhm,
chauvinism have? You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
That
mhm.
doesn't that doesn't begin to answer the question. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't begin
Yeah,
to answer the question
doesn't
of
begin.
how to, manage all of this variety. I'm just gonna stomp down my foot and just be I'm just gonna, well,
Yes,
you can try that.
that's
You're gonna
right.
see what you get with it, but it doesn't meet the moment. And
Mhm,
I think that there are models, existing models that are not cultural chauvinist, some of which may be Western, you know what I mean?
mhm,
Are
mhm.
not having to do
Absolutely.
with chauvinism and nationalism and supremacy and all of these kinds of notions, that actually can bring viable solutions,
Mhm,
solutions, to how
Mm-hmm.
to deal with this diversity, to deal with challenges, to deal with scarcities that have been created that need to be undone and reversed, to me, poverties that have been created that need to be remedied and undone,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, here we are. Here
And
we are.
the artist can help people begin to imagine that it can be said and it can be repeated and should be repeated. There's actually enough for everyone. There's
Ashe.
enough money. There's enough food. There are enough materials
Yes.
for enough infrastructure that
Yes.
doesn't have to be destructive of
Yes.
the natural environment, but can be synergistic with it. All of that can happen, right? That is all possible, doable, imaginable. In some cases, it's been done. It can
Yes.
be done again.
Yes.
It can be done. The not with the rule of billionaires, though.
Yes.
The
Yes.
it's we've been at it an hour and a
Yes,
half.
we have. It's that time.
Um, it is.
It's that
I
time.
am I am happy to continue this discussion, and especially since Thomas and Quinoaa couldn't join us tonight.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe we can continue it with them again next week.
Maybe
Um,
we can.
and that would be good, I think. Um, yeah. Oh, there was one other thing I did want to remind people of. Oh, I guess I have to do it again. It didn't hold. And that is, as I've said earlier, and since we're talking about um, art and getting sovereignty over our imaginations, again, I want to remind people the Pan African Film Festival is coming to Los Angeles in a matter of a week or two at the most. The and it isn't just a film festival; it's a film and arts festival. So there will be artists exhibiting their work. It should be taking place in the Baldwin Hills Cinemark, formerly the Magic Johnson Theaters, Baldwin Hills, at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. And the art show is typically in the mall next door, Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza, for the week and a half, 2 weeks of the festival. There will be poetry readings associated with it, probably a fashion show, probably a concert on opening night. I wouldn't be surprised, up in
Yeah.
the parking
Yeah.
lot up there. So
Yeah.
again, it is the Film and Arts Festival, and
Festival.
certainly the films are the centerpiece. And
Yes.
there's a film that will be the centerpiece film. I have no idea what it is yet because I haven't seen a program yet.
Yeah.
But again, just a reminder, it's coming up. Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza in Los Angeles, the Crenshaw District, King Boulevard and Crenshaw Boulevard. Or you might see an address that says King and Marlton, which is just the next block west, southwest. The And you can always go to their website to see movies and learn more about it. Um, that's some art that will be addressing. Well, it's always addressing the condition we find ourselves in. Um, I expect that there will be some classic films there, probably some Afro-futurist films there. Certainly, I'm going to guess there'll be some animation, definitely some documentaries, children's shorts, some
Yes. Yes.
features.
Yes.
It's going
Yes.
to be wonderful,
Yes, it is.
because it
And
always
yes,
is. How do we know? Because it always it
because it
always is.
always is.
And
And
what is this? the 34th year or something, or I might be
Is it?
shorting it.
Okay, no, I don't think you're shortening it. Um,
33,
you might
something
be
like.
lengthening it, but I think it's maybe 31, 32.
Okay. Well, I know it's been 30 for sure. So
Yeah,
31, 2 or 3 probably. Yeah.
yeah, and that's easy. We can Google that. But yeah, just it's something you sit back and shake your head at the incredible work that Ayuko and his wife have done, because everybody Ayuko Babu, in our patriarchal culture, we focus on the man, and we focus on the person who is more visible, right? But the
Exactly.
reality is he and his wife built the Pan
Mhm.
African Film Festival,
Mhm.
um, and uh, I have been to every one that has ever been.
Mhm.
I went to the first one, and I may have missed a year. If I missed a year, it was because I was ill. Something,
Mhm.
what I mean? It's something like that.
Mhm.
And I have I have a really deep pleasure in being able to say that. I feel
Mhm.
integrated in this tremendous history that has been
Yeah.
made. Um,
Now you're frozen
okay,
on my end.
unfrozen.
The
Okay,
history that has
it
been made
froze.
was the last thing I heard.
Okay, yeah, such to be a part of this tremendous history,
Yeah.
institution
Yeah.
that has been created, and the power that it spins out, the power, the ripples of
Mhm.
self-knowledge and
Yes.
self-awareness, and you know um
And it too is a community effort, right?
yes,
Because again, along
that's
with
right.
his wife, they're
Yes,
all the volunteers, right? They're all
absolutely.
the
Some of
volunteers.
them who have volunteered
Joe
from the
who
first
volunteers
festival.
every year, right?
Absolutely,
And I think that
absolutely.
was the only one I didn't go to, is the first one. But that's because we had, as I recall, we had just moved back I had just moved back from Northern California to Southern California. My
Mhm,
family, came with me for their first time living here.
mhm,
And
mhm,
but we were in Colton without a car. I was like,
mhm,
"Oh, this would be great. Can't go, I can't go though because we're stuck out here in Colton." But after that, I was like, "Yeah, gotta wait for that
mhm.
next year." And I don't know if that was the first or the second year. I remember it was 1992 because that's when we moved, but I just can't remember if it was the first or second year.
Mhm, mhm.
But I remember reading about it in the LA Times and being very excited and being frustrated that I couldn't go, but really happy that it was happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you were. I can
Yeah.
imagine. So, yeah, we really are at 8:38.
Yeah. So we can
Yes.
call it a night. I think folks here are ready to eat, or at least a grandmother is ready to eat. So
Mhm.
go see what mom is talking about.
Yeah.
So, folks, we want to thank you again for joining us for this conversation. Again, we did expect to have a couple of folks to join us in the conversation, but they will be with us soon. And we will talk more about the event that we're putting together to put this art into action, um, into the fray, as it were.
Yes.
So, you want to say good night, Tasha?
Good night, Tasha.
All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you for joining the Joko. We will see you next week. Please remember to like, please subscribe, and please share.